So Monique, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, and me and the students at the University of Waterloo who will be watching this video. Can you start by telling me about the job that you do now?
Yeah. Well, it's a unique role. So here at Accenture Digital, I'm responsible for what we call omni-channel customer experience transformation, which is a lot of big, shiny, bobbly words. But basically that means that I work with our customers across financial services, insurance, retail, and telecommunications to help them reformulate their customer experience strategy in the age of digital transformation.
Wonderful, thank you, that's clear. How would you define digital transformation? When you use that phrase, what do you mean?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different definitions. The simplest form or definition I would use is it is disruption. Because it is fundamentally changing the way we consume products and services. It's fundamentally changing the way that brands go to market, and it's fundamentally rocking the foundation of a lot of traditional business models, is really what it's doing.
Thank you. And why are organizations so interested in it today? How are they being disrupted? What's causing them to do this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you hear about some of the traditional disruptors in the market, you know, Amazon, Apple, Google, and they are certainly disruptors in certain industries, right? But I think as you look across industry sectors, especially here within Canada, the ability for those brands to compete at any means of differentiation is becoming smaller and smaller. And so the way in which they compete is, one, based on the data they have, two, the ability to extract insight from that data to do something compelling, and three, to provide a customer experience that is so differentiated and so personalized that that customer wouldn't think of going to another bank or another telecommunications provider. And so what it's done, though, is it's turned a lot of traditional organizations that are very grounded in old operating models and old distribution channels. It's changed how they have to think about going to market with their business and delivering those products and services. And so you'll hear banks have spun up digital garages or digital factories, and those are their hubs or sources of innovation around this digital transformation. Because at the end of the day, every business in Canada, at least from the medium-sized business and up, has to either put a path forward to be a disruptor or put a path forward to handle how they will be disrupted if they don't.
Wonderful, thank you. What are the technologies that are especially being featured in the work that you're doing today and the organizations are doing today?
Yeah, so it's a wide gamut because I also span the marketing analytics capabilities. So I'm the marketing analytics lead for Canada at Accenture as well. So, you know, you hear a lot about AI. It was the #1 hashtag last year on Twitter, and it is definitely one of the most talked about topics when it comes to disruption, because it will disrupt not only the skill sets that are required for future jobs, it disrupts or is part of the disruption in an operating and a business model, but it also allows businesses to think differently about their business and about how they manage the relationships with their customers. Machine learning, of course, goes alongside that. Quite frankly, machine learning is kind of the, you know, baby step into AI. We go on about AI for a long time. Blockchain, interestingly enough, is huge in digital disruption. And it's huge for a couple of reasons. It's not just the cryptocurrency conversation, which is certainly changing the way people think about business, but it's also the level of security that provides. So I've seen stories where there are organizations that have traditional ERP systems where they manage all of their financials and all of their procurement process and all of their contracts, that are looking at how can we leverage blockchain to be able to manage all of the data that needs to come together in a very secure way that allows us to go from obtaining the data to an invoice to a contract in a very secure way that doesn't require a huge amount of data integration, which a lot of organizations face today. And then I think the third one that's most applicable across industry as well is the cloud-first strategy. So every organization that I'm talking to lately is thinking about how can they move more of their infrastructure to the cloud. One, because from an operational cost perspective, there is elasticity and flexibility available in a cloud environment that's not available in your traditional brick and mortar on-prem data center. So that allows them to scale costs up and down as they need to with the business or seasonality of their business. It also provides a greater level of protection in some cases, depending on the cloud provider. But it also is changing how their traditional IT organizations operate. It's very costly within any one of our big banks, retailers, and telecommunications companies for the business to request data. And that process is fundamentally broken. It was fine before digital. Marketers or finance people or people in HR could request data or access to data from IT, but that process and that request process and that procurement process can take several weeks, sometimes several months, and the cost back to the business far outweighs often the benefit of having access to the data. So the cloud allows them to move away from that traditional broken operating model process, but it also allows them to tune and adjust their resources that they have within IT to be more focused on DevOps, which allows them to develop certain things and capabilities in-house that allow them to differentiate, but allow them to be more operationally efficient while driving operational costs down.
Makes sense. And so you're starting to talk about how digital transformation or elements of digital transformation affect business models for individual businesses and also presumably impact the ecosystems that they operate in.
Absolutely.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of tools and technology at play that underpin every organization you engage with as a consumer. And so one of the areas that I've seen a huge fundamental shift in is actually around the area of analytics. And that's not just the sort of traditional descriptive analytics around business intelligence and reporting, it's the statistical modeling. So, tools like R and Python and Lua coming out and providing an open source community where I can very easily learn how to program those languages in university. I can pretty easily get a job leveraging those skill sets in a vast array of organizations here in Canada. But I can use that not only for statistical prediction, but I can use those same skills and those same languages to build net new things. And that's where that DevOps comes into play, is that a lot of those organizations are looking for those types of skills so that rather than buying commercially available software that is off the shelf, comes with a large price tag attributed to it, they're leveraging DevOps people and people with statistical analytics backgrounds that know open source technology to build those things in-house, purpose-built for the brand.
Wonderful, thank you. And what do you see as the impact that digital transformation of organizations will have on society more broadly?
Well, I think that there's pros and cons. So I think we as consumers, I think we all feel like there's a tremendous amount of data that's being captured about us, regardless of where we engage with these brands, whether it's through a mobile app, social media, in-store, in-branch, wherever it may be. We're being tracked by Big Brother. And all these little breadcrumbs we leave in a digital capacity are just laying in some enterprise data lake within a bank or a retailer or a telecommunications provider. But when they engage us, they often engage us in a way that is somewhat tone deaf. It's as if they don't know they have that data. So I think we as consumers have rallied around the fact and accepted the fact that that data is being collected. But I think we're now more so than ever saying, if you're going to collect it, there's two things I want you to do. One, I want you to be responsible in its storage and its utilization. And two, for the love of God, use it to know me and use that to help me have a better experience with your brand, right? I think it's also fundamentally changing the overall organizational structure and the operating model. It's changing the traditional processes in terms of how people within an organization work together So agile is another huge component of digital transformation. So, the old adage or the old process of, planning and executing and having that whole thing, regardless of the project, take several weeks, several months is no longer acceptable. People are looking to iterate much faster than they've ever done in the past, rather than following a traditional waterfall. And they're actually much more accepting of failing fast and getting back up and starting over again, versus taking this really long time and failing at the end, only to then have to go all the way back to the beginning. So there's a huge change there.
Thank you. And education, do you see its role as being in successful transformation? And are there ways that education might need to change to do that better?
So I still think education is hugely important. So stay in school, finish your degree. I think regardless of where students are coming from, they need to have some education, whether that's formal, whether that's through local meetups, whether that's through other groups, around some of the transformational trends that are happening in the industry in which they want to work. And so there are lots of different meetups and things, I know, within the Greater Toronto area, I'm sure in Waterloo as well, that really people open up the kimono and they start to talk about the challenges they're having in their work environment and how are you solving for that. So they become very collaborative. I think there's a lot students can learn there. I think from an educational institution perspective, I think bringing things like that into the educational institution is very helpful, right? So how can educational institutions begin to host these meetups, looking at the hackathons that a lot of organizations sponsor, right? How can you get a bunch of students together, throw some data at them, throw a business problem at them that they've never had to tackle, because oftentimes a fresh set of eyes is what it takes. So I think those provide some practical hands-on experience, but it also helps to go from sort of the theory into the practical as well.
Fascinating. We're trying to do some of that at Waterloo.
That's
we could
awesome.
probably do a bit more. Are there things that government should be doing to enable digital transformation of the economy?
Oh, wow, that's a great one. Well, I think there's a couple of things that the government needs to do, quite frankly, around digital, period. We all put ourselves out there in a very vulnerable place when it comes to engaging in digital channels or capacities. I think that the government needs to do more around data privacy. If you look at the European Union and their adoption of GDPR and the fines that are imposed, I would not be surprised if Canada is not far behind, because before GDPR we were probably the foremost strictest when it came to data privacy and anti-spam legislation. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do that. I think the government actually needs to be looking at ways for themselves to leverage blockchain technologies to provide more security around the data they're capturing and housing about us. And I think they need to look at the responsibility and the ethics side of digital data utilization, and that will come out of the Privacy Commissioner's office, I would hope. That's my hope.
Great, mine too. Thank you. To bring it back down to organizations, where should they start with digital transformation? What should their first steps be?
Well, I think they need to re-examine their traditional business model. As you look at, your generation of students that are in your classes today, I'm a Gen Xer myself, so I like to say I'm half digital, half analog, but I have a preference for data privacy. I don't put it all out there, but others are much more open about it. They're like, they're going to find it out anyway, so go for it. I think, quite frankly, that we need to look at responsible utilization of that data. It is a gift, quite frankly. That's how it needs to be treated when a consumer engages a brand in some type of digital capacity. So I think the first step in digital transformation is what are we capturing, how are we storing it, how are we using it responsibly, and are we applying the right level of ethics around the utilization or storage of that data. Then I think secondly, they need to look at their traditional business model and figure out what's broken. And traditional NPS surveys or Net Promoter Score surveys really aren't sufficient enough. If they actually executed some really good data mining, they would find all the low-hanging fruit of the areas in which their customers want them to improve, yet they haven't done so. So I think they need to figure out what that low-hanging fruit is and how can they tune and adjust to fix that so that then they can tackle the bigger things, which is around the distribution or how they actually go to market. And I think the go-to-market component has operating model considerations, right? So what are the roles and responsibilities and skills that you need? How are those people organized? How are they managed? How do we empower them with a greater level of automation? So whether that's machine learning or artificial intelligence, and what are the processes or guardrails around those people working together to deliver an outcome for a customer? And then I think it also boils down to the formulation of the products and services in terms of how they go to market. So, credit cards is a great example. Mortgages is a great example. TD has just gone live with a real-time mortgage pre-approval via the mobile app and online. And they're the first bank in Canada to do so. Others have done pre-qualification. This is the first one to go full pre-approval. So I can open my map, I can put in all my information, and I can get real-time pre-approval for a mortgage while I'm shopping for a home. And so as you look at the banks that are looking to embed themselves in that home buying process, from the very beginning when you're starting to think about buying a home, through pre-approval of a mortgage, to procuring the mortgage, to then helping you once you've gotten into the home. So do you need to renovate? Can they provide discounts and different offers to help you not be house poor when you've purchased? So it's changing and expanding their products and services offering in a very different way.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So are some organizations more likely to be successful with digital transformation, and if so, why?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, because I've seen a mixed bag of results. So I think the good news is that most of the large organizations in Canada, especially retail, financial services, and telecommunications, are on a transformation journey. It is an evolution and not a revolution. It doesn't happen overnight. Some will go into it thinking they can get through it much faster. The fact of the matter is, transformation is just the new way of being. It's the new way of operating. So it has to become ingrained in the fabric of the culture of that organization. So the ones that are doing it well are the ones that have the open minds to innovation. And they tend to be having small missteps, for sure, it's going to happen, but they tend to rally around getting back up on their feet again once they've tried something that's not worked. The organizations that culturally are stuck in a rut of, well, we've always done it this way, are the ones that are really struggling with transformation. So I think what you see here in Canada, you see some retailers doing a very good job of beginning that digital transformation. The brick and mortar stores are still here, but they're now looking at how can we treat the brick and mortar store and the online shopping experience and bring those two together, right? So you see a lot of retailers that are looking at clienteling, which is to say, I can service you and provide you all the information you need to know while you're in store, while still allowing you to roam the store in a way that is unintrusive. Financial institutions, the big five, tend to be doing a fairly good job. There's definitely a mixed rating between the banks and who's doing it well and who's not. They've each taken slightly different approaches in how they've structured it. Some have made digital transformation a part of the fabric of who they are. Others have stood up, separate organizations almost entirely that are very Silicon Valley-esque. And that works for some, and it doesn't work for others. So there's really exciting times ahead in the next couple of years.
How should it be approached with employees? What do you see as the impact on them, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, well, so the employees is a tough one. There's a lot of, I hate to use the term change management, but there is a lot of change management that's required, and I think fundamentally, in order to rally the employees around the digital transformation strategy and the evolution of a company or an organization, they have to start with the employees, and they have to solicit the feedback and the input of those employees. You know, if you look across a multitude of large programmatic changes in organizations, the ones that have been the most successful are the ones that had the employees along for the whole ride. Because employees, if they feel like their input is valued and asked for, they feel some sense of ownership in the overall strategy, and therefore will be less reluctant to, I'm not doing that, right? So there's definitely that. I think it's communication is so abundantly key around why are we doing this. If people understand that their jobs could be at risk if they don't change as an organization, people will get on the bus pretty fast. But I also think it's important that organizations have to put in place programs to upskill certain employees within the organization, depending on where they are in their transformation journey. You know, a traditional resource who works in IT, who's been concerned for the last 18 years about keeping the lights on and the systems running, is going to find that job is going to change. You know, a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence can monitor uptime, downtime, and manage the SLAs, and, you know, flag issues. So it changes the role of some of those people as well. It changes the role of potentially frontline staff in certain organizations. So it's looking at who do we have, what skills do they have, based on that skill set and what they're really good at, what is their propensity to be able to take on a new evolved role, and then put those programs in place to know that the employees have some support to get there.
Thank you. And just two final questions.
Yeah.
First one, how do organizations become more innovative? How do they make that transition?
You've got to have at least one really good change agent in the organization who can rally the support of other leaders. If this doesn't start at the top with a groundswell of support underneath, it's just going to go out with yesterday's newspaper, in essence. Mm-hmm. The organizations, I think, that are doing it really well are bringing in leadership, not only that has an open mind for innovation, or perhaps has gone down that path before somewhere else, mm-hmm. But they're bringing in leaders and empowering them to change the organization. Because ultimately, if you bring in somebody who's very, traditionally sort of Silicon Valley minded, and you plop them in a very traditional, sort of antiquated organization, and you tell them you want them to change it, but you don't empower them to do it, they're gone within 12 months. They're out, you know. So it's interesting to see if you start walking the halls of a lot of the banks these days. You know, you're seeing people walking around in, you know, jeans and t-shirts and flip-flops, not the traditional banking organization as much anymore.
Thank you. And my final question, the people who will be watching this, mostly students who will be entering the workforce soon or might have recently entered the workforce, how can they better contribute to digital transformation inside their organizations? Yeah,
I think, the hard skills, definitely, right? You know, being up to speed on, you know, your particular forte, and if you're, you know, in engineering and you're in computer science, right, you already know you need to have open source skill sets. And if you've been involved in any skunkworks projects or things like that, you definitely want to float that high, right? You want to showcase and highlight your aptitude and willingness to be innovative, but you also want to be collaborative. So I would say, in addition to the hard skills that you bring to the organization, the soft skills you want is you must be a good communicator. Because ultimately, you might sit in a DevOps team or IT, or maybe there's an engineering group, but the requests don't come into that group unless there's a tangible business need. And so for you to be effective, it's not just being good at coding and building something that's really cool. It's being able to take a very complex process or concept and boil that down into very simple business storytelling, right? So become a storyteller. Practice telling the story of why something has happened. I've seen data scientist after data scientist that's built some really cool algorithm that does all these really cool things get grounded in the weeds trying to communicate to a CMO why they should plug that into their call center channel. And the CMO just glazes over like this guy has two heads. So get rid of the two heads. Two heads is not going to get you anywhere in business. What's going to get you is being able to distill it down to simple business explanations that tell a story of how it's going to drive value. Because ultimately, everything organizations do these days is either driven by the value it can deliver or the outcome to the customer.
Wonderful. Great advice, Monique. Thank you for taking the time
No worries.
To talk to me. I know this is going to be valuable for the students who will watch it, and so thanks for your time today.
No worries. Thank you.